The first time I saw my daughter smile after the funeral, she had a fish on the line. It was early. Mist rolled off the lake like it was trying to forget yesterday. We were sitting at the end of an old wooden dock, quiet, weathered, and cracked in the right places. Just the two of us and the soft whisper of water against the posts. Celine was wrapped in my late wife's hoodie. Too big for her. Too full of memory. The bobber dipped once. Then again. A third time, and she jerked the rod up with wide, unblinking eyes. The line danced. She laughed. That laugh, it gutted me. Because it wasn't polite. It wasn't for me. It was real. It was hers. And I hadn't heard it in 10 months. I was kneeling beside her, helping reel it in, small bluegill, shimmering in the dawn light, when the spell broke. Heels on grass. Too crisp. Too clean. Too early. A woman in a bone-white tracksuit approached like she was gliding above the ground, not walking on it. Short-cut blonde hair, stiff posture, a tablet tucked under one arm like it was a badge. "Excuse me," she said, tone dipped in poison. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned, still crouched beside my daughter. She blinked at the fish in her hands. Her smile didn't fade right away. It faded slowly, like light being squeezed out of a room. I stood up, offered my hand. "Morning. I'm Remy Torencraft. We moved into the Sycamore house about 6 weeks ago." She didn't take my hand. She tapped her screen. "This is a violation of Community Code 7.3. No fishing in the HOA-managed lake. I'm Karen Wellington, president of Lakeside Estates Residential Board." She said it like it came with a crown. "I wasn't aware," I said, choosing diplomacy over instinct. "We were told—" "It's all in the email," she interrupted, without looking up. "Regulations updated last month. No one told us. Check your spam." Behind me, I felt Celine's small fingers wrap around my arm. I looked down at her. She hadn't let go of the fish yet. $500 fine, Karen continued. "And I'll need you to vacate the dock immediately." I heard Celine inhale sharply. "It's just a lake." That's what someone might say. Just a rule. Just a fine. But grief doesn't work that way. Grief is never just anything. This dock was the only place she smiled. And Karen had just priced it at $500. After the incident that night, Celine wouldn't touch her dinner. She curled up in the corner of the couch with a blanket she'd started carrying around like armor. I stared at my inbox. Nothing from the HOA. No updates. No amended rules. Nothing but junk mail and a reminder to review my dental plan. I poured a glass of wine. Sat down next to her. "You did great out there," I said. She didn't look at me. "Fish was bigger than mine," I added. Still nothing. Then she asked, voice barely above a whisper, "Why do people like her hate people like us?" I wanted to answer. I really did. But what would I say? Because we're new? Because your mom didn't wear tennis skirts and host wine brunches? Because some people build fences and call them standards? Instead, I said what I knew was safe. They don't hate us, sweetheart. They just forget what it means to be human sometimes. Celine looked up at me. Then, "Make them remember." She didn't say it angrily. She said it the way a kid says, "Please come home," to a soldier. Like something small and enormous at once. Closing beat after she went to bed. I sat on the patio and stared out toward the lake. The moon hung low, silver streaks dancing across the water. Somewhere across the shoreline, I could make out lights from Karen's house. Laughter carried across the still water. I opened my laptop, pulled up the property records for Lakeside Estates. Then I opened a new browser tab, How to Buy a Lake. And so it began, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a promise. To my daughter, and to my wife. You don't mess with a family trying to heal. Not without finding out what happens next. I didn't go looking for war. I went looking for answers. It started with a trip to the mailbox. Not the digital kind. The rust-proof, HOA-approved, sandstone-colored kind at the end of my perfectly edged lawn. Among the grocery flyers and pre-approved credit cards was the fine. A manila envelope. Courtesy notice of violation, stamped in crimson ink like a bloodstain. $500, payable within 14 days. No fishing. No appeal process listed. No name on the letter, just the board. But we both knew who sent it. I stared at it for a long time, standing under the blistering sun of early spring. That afternoon, While Celine was in her room sketching in silence, I opened my laptop again. If Karen Wellington wanted to quote rules, I'd learn them fluently. By midnight, I knew more about lakeside estates than I ever wanted to. The HOA's website looked like it hadn't been updated since the Bush administration, but I found the digital covenants buried beneath a dead link. 87 pages of restrictions, amendments, and enforcement protocols. It read like a manifesto for lawn fascism. Page 56 caught my attention. Common properties, usage rights, and limitations. The lake was listed as shared communal amenity, maintained through a recreational lease with a third-party entity. A lease? Not owned. I dug deeper. Enter Merrick 2 days later. I met Merrick Henderson while returning from a grocery run. He was walking a tired-looking dachshund and wore a Panama hat like it was 1953. "Ah, the fisherman," he said with a knowing smile. "You met the Queen, then?" I smiled back. "Is that what you call her?" "Karen? Please. Around here, she's the HOA monarchy. No term limits, no opposition, no humility." I liked him immediately. We chatted at the curb for a while. He was retired, formerly an ethics attorney for a state agency. He'd lived here for 22 years and watched the neighborhood change from a sleepy upper-middle-class enclave into a tightly regulated kingdom under Karen's reign. "She doesn't just enforce the rules," he said. "She bends them, crafts them, weaponizes them." I raised an eyebrow. "She fined my neighbor $150 for having a basketball hoop visible from the street," he added, "and 2 weeks later, her grandson got a permanent hoop installed, somehow grandfathered in." I asked if I could pick his brain sometime. He invited me over that weekend. The backroom whispers Merrick's house was a time capsule. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, black and white framed photographs, the scent of coffee and old cedar. His study had the feel of a war room. He handed me a folder. "Consider this a dossier." Inside were printouts, screenshots, and hand-annotated notes on HOA meetings, votes, and financial disbursements. It was staggering. "She pushes people," Merrick said. "Hits them with fines, inspections, paper cuts until they bleed money. Then her real estate company swoops in and buys them out cheap." "You're serious?" "Deadly. Look at this. James Morris, Maria Gonzalez, the Winters family. All of them fined repeatedly. All of them sold below market. All of their homes ended up under LLCs tied to her brokerage." I felt my stomach twist. "And the lake?" I asked. "Technically still owned by Meridian Development Corporation," he said. "The HOA just leases it. But that lease ends in 60 days. That was the thread. The fishing ban, the sudden fine, the lack of notice. She was positioning herself, tightening control, prepping the land for a bigger play. She's trying to buy it, isn't she?" I asked. "She already made an offer," Merrick confirmed. "But she doesn't have the cash. She's banking on passing a special assessment and using that to fund the purchase." I leaned back, wheels turning. "So if someone else, say someone who hates being manipulated, were to buy it first," Merrick smiled slowly, "that would make you the most hated man in the neighborhood." "I think I already am." The first counter-move that night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly above me. I thought about Celine, about the smile on that dock, about Rachel, about how peace should be simple, but never is. I made 3 calls the next morning. One to a title search attorney, one to a conservation specialist, and one to a discreet banker who owed me a favor from past life. Karen wanted control. She thought she was the smartest person in the room. She forgot what happens when you corner someone who's already lost everything they care about. They stop playing fair. They learn to play for keeps. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. The kind of warm, still afternoon where nothing should happen. But beneath the quiet, every piece on the board was moving. I was standing in the corner of a dusty records office downtown, flipping through property files under fluorescent lights that buzzed like they were angry to be alive. The clerk, a wiry man with nicotine-stained fingers, handed me a folder marked Lakeside Estates, Parcel 6A. His eyes didn't linger, either bored or trained not to ask questions. Inside was confirmation of what Merrick suspected. The lake wasn't owned by the HOA. It was still under Meridian Development Corporation, the original builders of the neighborhood. The HOA had a 30-year recreational lease. one that expired in 49 days. More interesting, though, was a notation at the bottom, pending private acquisition, offer under negotiation, Wellington Properties. There it was. She wasn't just enforcing the rules. She was clearing the board for her queen's gambit. I took photos of the documents, walked outside into the heat with my phone already dialing. Revelation and Resolve Samuel Washington opened his door before I could knock. I saw your number pop up. Figured you'd be coming. He wore a soft blue sweater and spoke like a man who had spent decades watching others underestimate him. Samuel was a retired banker, one of the few people in the neighborhood who didn't cower when Karen's name came up. His home was lined with family portraits and vintage jazz vinyls. Grace hung in the air like incense. "She wants the lake," I said, handing him my phone. "And she's close." Samuel scrolled silently. His expression didn't shift. "I thought so," he finally murmured. "She tried to recruit me 3 years ago, offered a seat on the board if I back her plan to rezone the North Park." "What happened?" I asked too many questions. He set the phone down and poured us tea. "I've been tracking her, Remy," he said. "Every shell company, every deal, every home she's pressured out of someone's hands." He stood, opened a drawer, and retrieved a flash drive. "And I think it's time people knew what kind of empire she's building." I took the drive, and with it, the burden of what I had to do next. An ACT of war the next week was a blur of meetings and midnight planning sessions. Merrick introduced me to a zoning consultant who owed him a favor. Samuel tapped an old contact at Lakeside National Bank to quietly inquire about Meridian's liquidity. The news was worse than we'd hoped, and better for our plans. "Meridian's in trouble," Samuel said over lunch. "Overextended, bleeding. They need cash fast. They'll sell to anyone who can close quickly," Merrick added, "even if Karen already has a deal in motion." I stared down at my salad, but didn't taste it. "I could do it," I said aloud, more to myself than them. "You could," Samuel nodded. "But once I do, I can't go back to being just a grieving dad in a lakeside house. Maybe that's not who you are anymore." That night, I made my offer. $350,000. All cash. 7-day close. Through a shell company I just formed. Thorncroft Holdings, LLC, with nothing but clean financials and a single mission. I'll maneuver the queen. The personal cost 3 days later, it began. A citation for improper weed height on the side yard. Another for unauthorized landscaping gravel. One for a mailbox that was apparently 2 inches off HOA height regulations. They arrived daily, sometimes before I finished my morning coffee. I laughed at first, then I stopped laughing. One afternoon, Celine left her bike in the driveway while she ran in to grab her sketch pad. 15 minutes later, a ticket was taped to our door. It came with photos. Someone had been watching. Celine stood in the kitchen, staring at the printed images, her fingers trembling. "They're spying on us?" I wrapped my arms around her. "They're just trying to scare us." Her voice was small. "It's working." Later that night, she came into my office in her pajamas. "Why are we fighting them?" she asked. I hesitated. "Because no one else has." "Do we have to?" And in that moment, I almost said no. Almost told her we'd pack up and start over somewhere else. Someplace quiet. Someplace kind. But then I looked at her face. Her mother's eyes. The way her lip curled the exact same way when she tried to be brave. "I think we do," I said gently. "Because we deserve to live in a place where people like us don't have to ask that question." The midnight decision, I signed the offer letter to Meridian Development at 11:42 p.m. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, the same place where Celine had smiled without knowing she was being watched. The same place Karen planned to pave over for wine lounges and private decks. Not anymore. Tomorrow, the board would receive my wire transfer. And 48 hours after that, the lake wouldn't belong to the HOA anymore. It would belong to me. The day Karen Wellington lost control of the lake, she threw a party to celebrate her victory. It was all white tents and catered rows, orchestral playlists piped through Bluetooth speakers, and centerpieces made of lake pebbles and fake lilies. A banner read, "Lakeside Estates, elevating our future." What no one knew, at least not yet, was that the future had already changed hands. I stood across the street in the shade of a neighbor's elm tree. watching the crowd gather. Every member of her inner circle was there. Veronica Palmer in her Chanel sunglasses, HOA board members in matching polos, and even the mayor's cousin, conveniently dressed in business casual authority. It was almost impressive. The queen, throwing one last ball before the crown, is pulled from her head. Merrick appeared beside me. "You ready?" I nodded, still holding the envelope. Inside was the deed. Signed, notarized, filed, effective as of 8:15 a.m. that morning. "Your lawyer's waiting?" Merrick asked. "And Samuel?" "Front row." "Good." He glanced across the street. "Because she's about to announce that she owns your lake." The moment of collision, Karen took the mic just after 3 p.m., standing beneath a floral archway like she was being sworn into office. Her smile was tight, calculated. "Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful day," she began, voice oozing confidence. "We are standing on the future of Lakeside Estates, an exclusive vision that enhances our community, protects property values, and ensures only the right kind of activities continue here." The crowd clapped. "I'm proud to announce," she continued, "that Wellington Properties is in the final stages of acquiring this lake for permanent HOA stewardship." Applause. Flashbulbs from iPhones. "And as a show of commitment, we're launching a modest monthly assessment to fund improvements, better lighting, shoreline enhancement, and a members-only lakeside lounge." She gestured to an easel beside her, where a glossy architectural rendering showed a sleek structure replacing half the public dock. "We are entering a new era," she beamed, "one that reflects the standards this community deserves." I stepped forward. "Then I suppose you should meet the new owner." The truth unveiled. The microphone wavered slightly in Karen's hand. She squinted through the sunlight. "Mr. Thorncraft," she said, tone souring, "this is a private HOA gathering, I know," I replied. "But you're hosting it on private property. Mine." I pulled the document from the envelope and handed it to her. "For your records." She took it with a frown. "Read the first few lines." And froze. Around her, the crowd began to murmur. Merrick stepped beside me, flanked by Samuel and my attorney. "As of this morning," I continued, "ownership of the lake and the 10-foot perimeter surrounding it has transferred to Thorncroft Holdings, LLC. The recreational lease your board referenced expired this morning. And as per Clause 14b, I've chosen not to renew." Karen tried to recover. You can't. This is community land." "It was never yours," I said calmly. "Just leased. And the owner, now me, has revoked access effective immediately." Someone from the crowd gasped. Another spilled a drink. I turned to the guests. "Those of you enjoying your wine are technically trespassing, but I'll give you 15 minutes to leave. No citations today." Samuel stepped forward. "But tomorrow, we start reviewing every financial action taken under Ms. Wellington's leadership." Karen's face went from fury to fear. Her voice suddenly shrill. "This is a violation of trust." "No," Merrick said. "What you've done for years. That was the violation." The quiet after the crowd dispersed in awkward silence. Plates abandoned. Music still looping like the party didn't know it was over. Karen remained frozen, staring at the document. I watched her lips move as she reread it, searching for a clause that would reverse time. Celine was waiting on the dock when I returned home, her sketch pad open on her knees. "Was it today?" she asked. "You sat beside her." "Yeah, it was today." She looked out at the water. "Are we safe now?" "Not yet," I said honestly. "But the fight's fair now, and it's ours." She nodded, then drew a soft outline of the lake. No wine tents, no studies, just water and light and space to breathe. Karen came back with fire in her eyes. 2 days after the party, I received a cease and desist letter from her attorney, accusing me of unlawful interference with HOA recreational rights and community destabilization. It arrived in a faux leather folder like it was meant to intimidate, but the law office's watermark was crooked. That same afternoon, I received my 5th HOA violation of the week: improper garage door hue. My door had been painted the same taupe since I moved in. This wasn't retaliation. It was desperation, and desperation makes people reckless. The sinking ship. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Karen sat at the head of the long folding table, jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it hurt. Her supporters, once vocal, smug, untouchable, were suddenly quieter. A few avoided eye contact. Samuel stood and cleared his throat. I moved to initiate a forensic audit of all HOA expenditures from the past 5 years. He said it gently, almost like an offering. Karen slammed her gavel. Out of order. That's not. It's in the bylaws, said Merrick, rising beside him. Section 9.2. Any member in good standing can call for an audit with a petition of 10 signatures. We have 32. Gasps. A ripple in the crowd. Someone actually clapped. Karen stood. This is a coordinated attack. You're being manipulated by a man who's undermining the very foundation of our community. You mean the man who stopped you from selling off the lake to fund your failing real estate empire? I said, stepping forward. Karen froze. Silence swept through the room. Merrick dropped a folder on the table. Inside were printouts of property records, shell corporations, and email threads linking Karen's development firm to offshore accounts. The names were different, but the bank addresses matched. The same LLCs that had quietly bought foreclosed homes on our block. The same hands pulling all the strings. Everything you've done has been about control, I said, and profit. You used fines to push families out, then flipped their homes for a gain. This community was your personal inventory. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Karen reached for the folder, but it slid just out of her grasp. Veronica Palmer, one of her board allies, stood. Her voice shook. Is this true? Karen's voice cracked. This is a smear campaign. You don't know what you're talking about. I trusted you, Veronica said quietly. Then, more board members began rising. One by one, a silent mutiny. Karen's empire was collapsing, and she knew it. The final fall 2 nights later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Merrick standing there, holding his phone like a trophy. You need to hear this, he said. Hit play. Karen's voice filled the air. I can make your violations disappear, Merrick. You scratch my back. I'll make sure you land on the new board. Tell Remy the lake is contaminated. Scare him off. I stared at the phone, blinking. She tried to bribe you. She tried to buy me, he said with a tired smile. She forgot I retired from ethics law. The next morning, I forwarded the recording to the police. By the end of the week, Karen Wellington was under investigation for financial misconduct, unlawful retaliation, and attempted environmental tampering. But the worst was still to come. The unseen war security footage from the lake's north dock, time-stamped at 2:13 a.m., showed Karen and 2 board members sneaking onto the property. One held a bottle. Another carried gloves. A frame-by-frame analysis showed her pouring something into the water. When police arrived at her door with a warrant, she accused me of framing her. But it didn't matter. She was booked within the hour. I watched it unfold on the news. No satisfaction. Just a strange, hollow ache. She wasn't the villain of some fairy tale. She was a woman who'd built her worth on control, and when it was taken from her, she unraveled. Power doesn't make people corrupt. It just reveals what's already there. Aftershocks at the next emergency HOA meeting, Karen's chair sat empty. Safra Dusklund, quiet florist, longtime board member, stood and read from a notepad. I nominate a full restructuring of the HOA, with new elections, term limits, and an ethics committee selected by residents. It passed unanimously. The motion to rename the lake passed too, Rachel's Lake, in memory of the woman who taught my daughter to fish and taught me how to fight for peace. We held the first community fishing day on a Saturday morning, just as the sun cracked open the lake like an egg yolk spreading light across the water. No speeches. No banners, just kids with tangled lines, adults with travel mugs, and the sound of laughter bouncing off the surface of something we'd nearly lost. Seelan stood beside me on the dock, baiting a hook for a younger boy who kept dropping his worm. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. There were smudges of dirt on her jeans. I hadn't seen her look this alive in a long time. I told him to let the fish go gently, she said, watching the boy kneel at the edge of the dock, hands cupped like he was releasing a secret. He listened. Most people do, she said, if you talk like they matter. I turned to her. You're going to do good things, I said. She didn't answer, just grinned and walked off toward the next kid who needed help. The new rules 3 months had passed since Karen's resignation. The HOA was unrecognizable now. Term limits, open books, monthly meetings with coffee and actual conversations. The ethics committee, a rotating group of residents with zero ties to real estate, was already investigating years of quietly diverted funds. When the audit came back, it confirmed what many suspected. Karen had siphoned thousands into consulting contracts with companies that didn't exist. Some were traced to her sister, one to an ex-lover, one, painfully, to a church she had never attended, just a name to hide the paper trail. She lost everything. Her house sat empty now, shutters closed, a brittle for sale sign wilting in the front yard. Every week, a new price slash. No taqueros. Reputation doesn't leave with the person. It echoes. The legacy, I never planned to stay this long. When I bought the house, it was just supposed to be a soft landing. A quiet shoreline where Celine and I could patch together what grief had torn apart. But the lake changed things. Maybe it was always going to. The day I transferred the deed to the newly formed Rachel's Lake Community Trust, I asked only 3 things in return. No single person would ever again control community resources. Children would always have free access to fish, play, and wonder. My wife's name would never be erased from the place she helped heal. The new board agreed, and then they surprised me. They added a 4th rule. No fines may be issued for the act of healing. It wasn't legal language. It wasn't enforceable, but it didn't need to be. Closing scene that evening, after the fishing lines had been packed up and the sun had bruised the sky purple, Celine and I sat on the dock. The same dock where it all began. The same dock where everything changed. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Did you do all this for me?" she asked. I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said. "I did it for us." And then, quieter, "But I finished it for her." She nodded. Water lapped at the wood beneath us. "You know," she said, "I used to dream about leaving, going somewhere people weren't so ugly. And now I think I'd rather stay. Maybe make it better." I reached over, squeezed her hand. That's the best revenge. Final reflection, we didn't burn the system down. We rewired it, brick by brick, rule by rule, not for vengeance, not even for justice, but for peace, the kind you earn by staying. And if you're out there right now, fighting a battle you didn't ask for, against people who smile while they cut you down, remember this. The rules were made by someone, which means they can be unmade. So rewrite them, patiently, legally, brilliantly, then leave something behind worth protecting. Even if it's just a dock, a fish, and a daughter's laughter rippling across the water.